All right, get ready because we're going deep on this one. Saint Augustine of Hippo.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, from the stuff you sent me, this guy wasn't just some like theologian. He was like a rock star,
Mm-hmm.
philosopher who basically like shaped how we even think about Western Christianity.
Right.
And we're talking like almost 2,000 years ago, right?
Exactly. His impact is incredible. And what's so fascinating about Augustine
Yeah.
is how his own, personal journey
Yeah.
really kind of mirrors how his thinking changes.
It's a real transformation.
He really is. You know, he goes from kind of like a
Yeah.
rebellious youth to one of the most important figures in the church.
That's flawless.
And it all starts in the 4th century.
Okay.
Roman North Africa.
Okay, so set the scene for us. What was his childhood like?
Okay, so picture this. 354 AD.
Okay.
He's born in Thagaste.
Which is now Algeria, right?
Exactly. Modern day Algeria.
Okay.
And here's the thing. His family, they were totally split down the middle when it comes to religion. His father, Patricius, was a pagan, like total Roman official.
Wow.
And his mother, Monica, devout Christian.
Oh, man. That's got to make for some interesting empty.
Oh, I can only imagine the dinner conversations.
Family dinners, right? I can only imagine. So that kind of religious, that back and forth, probably had a big impact on how he saw the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can see that tension playing out in his writing his whole life. And, Augustine, he was a smart kid.
Yeah.
Like really bright, got a great education, top-notch stuff, Latin literature, all the classic works.
So where did he go to school?
First in Medaros, then in Carthage.
Carthage? Now that rings a bell.
Yeah.
It was a major intellectual hub back then.
It was.
But I also remember reading about it being known for, well...
Let's just say it had its temptations.
Exactly. So Augustine, the brilliant young guy.
Oh, yeah. He was drawn to all that.
So this is where we get the classic rebellious youth chapter, huh?
Pretty much. But underneath all that, Augustine was grappling with some seriously big questions.
Like what?
The meaning of life, good versus evil, that kind of stuff.
Right, right.
And that search for answers led him down all sorts of different paths.
Yeah.
Philosophies, religions.
Makes sense.
In Carthage, he got really into Manichaeism.
Now, that's a religion that tried to explain the universe as this battle between, like, light and darkness, right?
Yeah.
Good and evil.
Exactly. They saw the world as this cosmic struggle.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it?
It is, because later on,
Yeah.
he becomes, one of their biggest critics.
Yeah, total 180. But
at the time, it made sense to him. It gave him a framework for understanding the world.
Yeah. So when did things start to shift for him?
Well, it's not until he moves to Milan in 384 AD
Milan, okay.
that his worldview really starts to change.
Okay, Milan, this is where it gets interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I read about this key encounter he has with Bishop Ambrose, a real charismatic figure, known for, intellectual sermons.
Yeah. Ambrose, he was a game changer. He had this incredible way of interpreting the Bible through the lens of Neoplatonism.
And Neoplatonism is all about emphasizing the spiritual and immaterial, right?
Exactly. It's all about this higher realm of existence. And for Augustine, who already had a background in, philosophy, this really clicked for him.
So Ambrose basically showed him a new way of looking at Christianity.
It was like finding the missing piece of the puzzle.
Totally. But there's another part to this story.
Oh, yeah. And this one's a bit more dramatic.
You're talking about the famous Garden in Milan episode?
That's the one.
I mean, it's classic. Augustine's wrestling with all this inner turmoil.
Right.
And then he hears this kid's voice, right?
A child's voice chanting, Tulaledge, Tulaledge.
Which means take up and read.
Take up and read.
And it leads him to a passage in Romans.
Powerful stuff.
It's such a vivid scene, this moment of, sudden clarity. Conversion.
It's one of the most famous conversions stories.
It's true.
In history,
Yeah.
and it really shows you the power of those,
Yeah.
seemingly random moments of insight,
Totally. So whether you take it literally or metaphorically,
Yeah.
it speaks to something universal.
It does. That sudden shift in perspective,
Yeah.
that can change everything.
Absolutely. So after this experience in the garden, Augustine goes all in on Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
Gets baptized by Ambrose in 387 AD. That's a huge turnaround.
It was a whirlwind, and it really shows you just how intense Augustine was. He dove headfirst into everything.
Right into the deep end. But his journey's not over yet, is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
After his baptism, he heads back to North Africa, founds a monastic community in Thagaste.
Wait, hold on. From, wild child philosopher to monk.
Yep.
That's a pretty big lifestyle change. What led to that?
It seems that for Augustine, embracing Christianity
Yeah.
wasn't just about, like, intellectual agreement.
Right,
It was
yeah.
about a total transformation of his
Right.
life.
So this period of monastic living.
It was a time for serious introspection,
Yeah.
spiritual growth.
Okay.
But even when he's trying to live a quieter life,
Yeah.
his intellect,
Yeah.
his influence, it just couldn't be contained.
And that takes us to how he eventually becomes Bishop of Hippo, right?
It does.
How does that happen?
It's kind of unexpected, actually. He's visiting Hippo Regius in 391 AD,
Okay.
and he gets practically drafted into the priesthood
Drafted by who?
by the local Christian community there.
Really?
They saw his potential, his brilliance. They knew he was meant for bigger things.
So they just like ordained him right there on the spot.
Well, not exactly on the spot, but
Yeah.
they definitely recognized his gifts
Yeah.
and kind of pushed him towards leadership.
Oh, yeah.
Initially, he resisted,
Really?
but eventually he embraced the role
Okay.
and rose through the ranks. By 395 AD,
Yeah.
he was Bishop of Hippo.
That's a quick rise to the top.
Yeah.
So he went from resisting the priesthood to becoming bishop in just a few years.
He did. Clearly, Augustine was a force to be reckoned with.
He was. But becoming bishop wasn't all smooth sailing, was it?
Not exactly. Augustine faced some major challenges, especially with all the theological debates happening within the church at the time.
You're talking about the Donatist schism and the Pelagian heresy, right?
Those are the big ones.
Can you break those down for us? Explain why they were so significant.
All right, so the Donatists, they were this North African Christian sect,
Okay.
and they had some very strong opinions about the purity of the church.
Purity. Meaning what?
Well, they argued that sacraments, like baptism,
Okay.
they were only valid if the priest performing them was morally pure.
So like a perfect priest.
Exactly. Augustine, though, he saw things differently.
Oh, so this wasn't just some theological nitpicking. This was about the very essence of the church, right?
Absolutely. It was about authority, salvation, and the debate had real-world consequences.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a big deal. So what did Augustine argue?
He argued for a more inclusive church where the sacraments, they worked because of God's grace,
Okay.
not because of the priest's personal holiness.
Interesting. So he's pushing for a more universal vision of the church, not limited by these strict rules about who's in and who's out.
Exactly. He saw the church as this mixed body
Yeah.
of saints and sinners united by their common faith.
You know, it makes you think about how similar debates are still happening today.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just in different forms. Okay, so that's the Donatist controversy.
Yeah.
But what about the Pelagian heresy? What was at the heart of that one?
Okay, so Pelagius, he was a British monk,
Okay.
and he was challenging some pretty fundamental ideas
Like what?
about human nature and salvation.
Right.
He really emphasized free will
Okay.
and downplayed the role of divine grace. Basically, he argued that humans were inherently good.
Okay, but if we're inherently good, then why do we even need salvation? Where does sin even come from?
Exactly. And that's Augustine's main point against Pelagianism.
So what did Augustine believe?
He believed that we're born with this tendency towards sin, what he called original sin.
Original sin. Okay, I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully get it.
Basically, he's saying we inherited this flawed nature from Adam and Eve,
Yeah.
way back in the Garden of Eden.
From their disobedience, right?
Yak.
Okay, so that explains the original sin idea.
Yeah.
But why was this such a big deal?
Because it completely changes how we understand ourselves and our relationship with God.
Okay, how so?
Augustine believed that because of original sin, we're all inclined to do wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and we need God's grace to choose good.
And to reach salvation.
Exactly. It has huge implications for Christian doctrine.
Yeah, this is getting pretty deep. And we haven't even touched on Augustine's major works like The City of God.
Oh, yeah. The City of God.
A real masterpiece from what I've heard.
A cornerstone of Western thought.
We'll save that for part 2.
Definitely.
There's so much more to uncover in Augustine's world.
Oh, absolutely. His intellectual journey was far from over.
And neither is ours.
We've got a lot more to explore in part 2.
Buckle up, listeners. We're diving deeper into the mind of St. Augustine of Hippo.
It's going to be a fascinating ride.
See you there.
It's really interesting how Augustine's own, struggles, with temptation and sin
Right.
really shaped how he thought about human nature.
Yeah.
He doesn't just, talk about original sin as some abstract idea.
Right.
He really grapples with it personally.
Yeah, and that makes it so much more relatable.
Right.
You know, like, here's this brilliant guy
Mm-hmm.
who also struggled with making good choices. Makes you think, maybe we're not so different.
We're all human.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like Augustine just became perfect after his conversion, right?
No, not at all. Augustine believed that pull towards sin
Yep.
doesn't just disappear.
Right.
It's something we constantly battle with.
So how did he think we could overcome that?
Well, he was a huge believer in divine grace.
Okay, yeah.
He believed that God's grace is essential for us to choose good over evil
Right.
and to ultimately be saved.
Okay, but he also had some, let's say, intense ideas about how that grace worked,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to predestination.
Oh, predestination.
That's a tough one. The idea that God already knows who's going to heaven and who's not.
Right.
I always wonder, like, what's the point of even trying to be good?
It's a question that's been debated for centuries.
Yeah.
And Augustine's take on it is pretty complex.
So how did he see it?
Well, he believed that God,
Yeah.
in his infinite wisdom, had already chosen certain people for salvation.
Okay.
But he also insisted that this didn't mean we don't have free will.
So we still make choices.
We do. But God's grace works in ways we can't always understand.
It's like a divine nudge in the right direction.
You could say that.
But it's still a bit of a head scratcher, you know,
Definitely raises a lot of questions.
about free will, responsibility.
Even today, theologians and philosophers are still debating Augustine's views on predestination.
Well, it's clear Augustine wasn't afraid to tackle the big questions.
Oh, no, he was fearless.
And speaking of big questions, we have to talk about his most famous work,
Oh, yeah,
The City of God.
a masterpiece.
It's considered one of the most important books in Western thought.
It really is. It's monumental.
What makes it so special?
Well, imagine this sweeping epic
Okay.
that contrasts two cities,
Okay. Two cities.
one representing the divine realm,
Okay.
the city of God,
Right.
and the other, the earthly realm,
Mm.
the city of man.
So like good versus evil playing out on a cosmic scale.
Not quite a literal battle.
Okay.
It's more of a philosophical exploration
Okay.
of human purpose and destiny.
Right.
Augustine uses these two cities as metaphors
Okay.
to explore the tension between our earthly desires
Yeah.
and our spiritual aspirations.
So how do we live in this world, but also strive for something beyond it?
Exactly.
That's a question we're all still grappling with.
It's a timeless question. And that's what makes the city of God so relevant.
It speaks to that desire for something more, some greater meaning.
Augustine argues that true happiness can only be found in the city of God, in union with the divine.
It's like we're all on this pilgrimage towards something more fulfilling.
That's a great way to put it.
Human history. It's like this story of these two cities intertwined.
Exactly.
It's amazing how he was writing about these themes way back in the 5th century.
I know, it's incredible.
And they're still so relevant today.
That's the sign of a true visionary.
And Augustine wasn't just a philosopher.
Right.
He was a leader in the church.
He was.
We talked about the Donatist controversy,
Mhm.
how his views on the church and the sacraments
Yeah.
really shaped Christian practice.
Oh, yeah. Augustine's contributions to the church were huge.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, he really emphasized the importance of the sacraments.
Okay.
Baptism, communion, those outward signs of inward grace.
Right.
But he didn't agree with the Donatists about their validity depending on the priest.
So it wasn't about the person performing the sacrament, but the power of God working through it.
Precisely. Augustine believed the sacraments were channels of God's grace, no matter who the priest was.
That's a pretty radical idea for the time.
It was revolutionary.
It changed how the church saw itself, its role in society,
Completely shifted the power dynamic.
and his impact. It's still felt today.
Oh, absolutely. Augustine's influence is everywhere.
We see it in Catholicism, Protestantism.
Even in the writings of reformers like Martin Luther and John Calvin,
His ideas about sin, grace, the church.
they became the foundation for centuries of theological debate.
And it's not just theology.
Right.
Augustine's blend of Neoplatonism and Christianity
Yeah.
had a huge impact on philosophy.
He showed that faith didn't have to be blind acceptance.
You could use reason in philosophy.
A legacy that continues to inspire thinkers today.
Augustine's journey is a testament to his brilliance,
Absolutely.
his spiritual depth.
But what do you think it is about him that still resonates with people today?
Why do we still care about this guy who lived almost 2,000 years ago?
It's funny, as we've been talking about him,
Yeah.
I keep thinking
Yeah,
he was kind of like us in a lot of ways.
I know what you mean.
He had doubts.
Yeah.
He wrestled with these huge questions.
Mm-hmm.
went through a major, like, personal transformation. I mean, he's a complex guy, for sure.
Definitely.
But what's really amazing
Yeah.
is how those struggles, his curiosity, it's all there in his theology.
Right. It's not just some distant, like, preaching.
No.
He's right there with us.
Struggling with it.
Yeah, working through these things. You see it in his early writings.
Yeah.
How he's drawn to all these different philosophies.
Oh, yeah.
Looking for truth and meaning.
Searching.
Yeah. And that makes that moment in the garden when he hears that voice.
The child's voice.
Yeah, and turns to scripture.
Powerful stuff.
So powerful.
And even after he converts, he never stops questioning.
Always searching.
Debating with other thinkers.
Yeah.
Challenging interpretations.
Really digging deep.
He wasn't afraid to change his mind, you know.
He was a lifelong learner.
Absolutely.
It's inspiring to think someone who was so lost could find that kind of meaning and purpose.
It's a powerful story.
It is.
And he didn't just find it for himself.
Right. He shared it.
He put it into words.
Yeah. And it resonated with people for centuries.
Oh, centuries.
And it's still relevant today.
It is.
It's not about blind acceptance.
No.
It's about engaging with those big questions. Wrestling with our doubts, our beliefs.
Yeah.
Being open to change.
That's Augustine's challenge to us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into St. Augustine, what would you say is his most enduring legacy?
That's a good question.
What can we, like living in the 21st century, learn from this guy from so long ago?
I think Augustine would tell us to never stop searching. Question everything. Engage with different perspectives.
The deep learning.
Keep pursuing the truth wherever it leads.
That's a great takeaway.
That pursuit of understanding, that's his real gift to us.
Beautifully said. And to our listener, I hope this deep dive has made you curious about St. Augustine.
Yeah.
He's a fascinating figure.
He is.
Maybe you'll even find yourself exploring his works.
Reading Confessions.
Yeah.
City of God.
Who knows? Maybe you'll have your own garden moment.
A moment of clarity.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of St. Augustine.
It's been a pleasure.